Oh, all right. This week, despite not having the room for a proper pinball table, I've been playing an awful lot of pinball on a physical table. Well, virtually. Let me explain. For as long as I can remember, I've always dreamt of having my own full-size pinball table. Now, I don't know which one I'd get, a classic or perhaps a modern table from Stern. It's always been an unachievable goal though, because even if I was comfortable with the not inconsiderable cost of these, it wouldn't matter because I just don't have the room for one. Anyway, due to the lack of space, owning a pinball table is one of those dreams that I just thought I'd never fulfill. However, in the last couple of years, my interest perked up again. You may be familiar with the compact home arcade machines from Arcade 1-Up. Well, a while back they added some pinball tables to their range. These 3/4 scale virtual pinball machines employ an LCD screen playfield and give the user a choice of 10 built-in tables. Over the last year, these have become available in the UK, and that resulted in me doing a bit of research on them to see if they were a feasible option for me. I then became aware of the Legends Pinball that costs roughly the same as the Arcade 1-Up machines in the US, but most reviewers seem to think that this was the better choice. And the reasons being that first, the Atgames Legend has 2 LCD screens, one for the playfield and another one for the scoreboard and backglass graphics, which change depending upon the game being played. On the Arcade 1-Up device, well, that only has one full colour screen. That's for the playfield. The backglass graphics are just fixed artwork. The scores are displayed below these on a dot matrix display. But perhaps more importantly, the Atgames tables are connected devices that have access to an online store where you can buy additional packs of tables. And if you want to take things even further, you can buy a video input backglass switchboard or VIBS board, and once installed in the machine, this will allow you to use both the backglass and the table as a dual screen output for your various PC-based pinball emulators. So it seems like the Legends Pinball is the way to go. Now, there is a company in the UK that sells these, albeit at quite a considerable markup from the US price. But unfortunately, despite being smaller than a regular table, it's still way too bulky a thing to fit in my house. But then in the last quarter of 2022, it seemed like my pinball dreams might finally become a reality, because Atgames launched the Legends Pinball Micro. This is a smaller table and it contains all the features of the original, shrunken down, but with more built-in tables, 50 versus 22. The only fly in the ointment is at the moment it's only shipping to customers in the US. Well, of course I do have ways around that, so a couple of weeks after ordering, the Legends Pinball Micro arrived. Now, out of the box, it does require a small amount of assembly. The upper section containing the backglass and speakers needs to be attached to the playfield, and 2 cables are run up through a hole and plugged into the appropriate sockets before the 2 halves are then screwed together. The connections from left to right are an HDMI input to use the lower screen as a monitor, and there's a USB port for additional storage, another USB port for OTG functions, an Ethernet socket, and that's one option for your internet connection, but it's also got Wi-Fi. And then finally, there's the power socket and a proper on-off switch. The power supply is universal, so to use it here in the UK, all I needed to do was swap out the IEC C5 US style power lead with a UK one. Once it's powered on and booted up, you're ready to go. You can just play it there and then. But if you do plan on downloading any new content to the device, you'll need to connect it up over the internet. And you'll find once you do that there is a firmware update waiting to install, and I believe it is something that's worth doing to improve the performance. When it comes to the built-in games, there are a total of 50. There are 8 newly created Taito tables, and then there's a selection of 42 others that are either based around or featuring recreations of actual Zaccaria pinball machines from the past. Now, in case you didn't know, the Italian company Zaccaria was the 3rd largest pinball manufacturer in the world, behind Bally and Williams. And no, I hadn't heard of them before this, but hey, you can't know everything. Anyway, enough of this. Finally, let's look at some pinball being played.
Start mode is lit. Double jackpot.
Now there's one thing I didn't realise when I set out making this video, and that's how difficult it was going to be to shoot virtual pinball and do it justice. As a result, this video has taken me a lot longer to put together than I anticipated. A detailed vertical playfield really does not fit well into a horizontal video frame, and another important thing to bear in mind is that these tables are drawn/rendered with perspective, and by that I mean if you look at them from the point of view of the player, the table looks right, but if you were to shoot them from the side or a different angle, then the illusion falls apart. So to shoot these tables at their best, I really want to record them from the point of view of the player, and of course on a video frame like this that leaves a lot of dead space at either side. So one thing I thought about doing was showing the tables in a split screen view like this, and that way I can show the backglass graphics that are associated with each playfield. This view though isn't detailed enough to show off the playfield properly. However, I'll continue to show you a few more of the tables this way before looking in more detail at the playfields. The playfield area is a 1080p 15.6 inch monitor that's set at a suitably raked angle, and the backglass area with the scores on it is an 8-inch LCD.
Sinistar, hurry up. Hit the spinner.
Talking of those screens though, I do wish they'd have used a larger one in the back glass section here. There's plenty of room for them to go from the 8-inch up to perhaps a 9 or a 10-inch. There's all this bezel space that's going unused. Also, it's quite a long way up, so that when you play the game, your eye has to travel quite a distance to look at this small scoring section or the matrix that might appear on some games. It'd be nice if it had been brought down a little bit. Perhaps the speakers were at the top instead. Minor quibbles though. Now, as far as the playfield, you might think that 15.6 inches would be too small, and of course it would be if it was a television across the room, but this 1080p screen here, you're playing it at a very close distance. It's nicely detailed. I can read everything on the playfields, all the text. I'm having no issues at all with that, and that's with my less than stellar eyesight. Although I certainly wouldn't have wanted to go any smaller than this. I think this is the minimum size that you can do one of these at sensibly. The movement of the ball is super smooth at 60 frames a second, and I've never noticed any slowdown. The controls are also ultra responsive. There's no discernible lag. It all feels so real and immediate that once you start playing, the technology side of this seems to fall away and you're just left playing pinball. Now, I mentioned it was a bit difficult to capture this one for the video. You can picture all sorts of arms and things holding cameras at different angles, trying to avoid reflections. I used lots of different cameras, well, a good variety. I mean, in here you'll find footage that's 1080p 30, 1080p 60, 4K 30 and 4K 60. All different cameras used at different points to try and get the best results. So if at any point in this video you see something that looks less than stellar, perhaps a little bit blurry or jerky, there's a herringbone pattern, any of that kind of stuff, that's down to me. It's not down to this thing. It looks super sharp in person. There's no issues at all with the image quality. You can put your face very close to this playfield. I should mention the raked angle on here. Sometimes with LCDs, you might get a screen that if you put it off center, all the colors wash out, the image looks weird. Not having that issue with this at all. Presumably they picked a panel that was particularly good at off-axis viewing. So yeah, bear all that in mind. If you see anything a bit weird in this video, it's down to me, not this. Now there's loads of settings and options available to the user to tweak these tables to their preference, one of which is the option to change the lighting on them based upon the time of day. Now this is more than just a simple brightness setting. It doesn't really come across properly on this video, but you'll probably find that you prefer one of these modes to the other two. Fortunately, the table remembers the mode that you prefer, so it goes straight into that one the next time you play.
Now you will go into the future.
The illusion that's being created here to make these virtual tables feel more like the real thing is really quite impressive. There's a lot going on to make this happen, more than you might first appreciate. For example, the tables are utilising dynamic lighting effects. It's easiest to see this demonstrated on a simple table like this. Look at the way the ball is casting shadows from virtual light bulbs as it moves around. This really helps to give this the feeling of it being a solid 3D object. And of course sound plays a big part here as well.
The dragon shows his claws.
The twin speakers at the back, while small in size, pump out plenty of volume, and the sound from them is clear, full-bodied and well-rounded. But perhaps more importantly, this is augmented by haptics. You actually feel the thump of the flippers and the various features acting on the virtual ball inside the virtual table. I think it's all done with bass transducers, and the level of these can be adjusted independently of the audio volume using the controls on the top right of the playfield. But yeah, the sound and the haptics play a massive part, and when you add everything together, it's enough to fool your brain into just getting lost in the gameplay. The table's got a good weight to it. By that I mean it's not going to move around while you're playing. I mean, you can get a little bit rough with pinball sometimes, and this has got rubber feet on it, but it's also holding itself down due to its not inconsiderable weight. Although you can move it around the house a lot easier than you could a full-size pinball table. One thing I'll mention, on the corners here, I don't know if you can see this, we've got the corner brackets. You could actually take those off and replace them with proper pinball table legs, although I think that might look a little bit weird having a little tiny pinball table on proper full-size legs. It's more something you're going to put on a counter like this. It's got metal sections all around the top here, and those feel just like a normal pinball table when you rest your hands either side. I did think about opening this up to show you. People like to see inside things in the videos, and whilst I know there's not going to be anything of any note in here, I had a go. I started unscrewing these sections here, and I unscrewed all of those and the screws inside, and I realised I'd had to take all the top back off again to get into it properly, so I gave up and put them back on. If you do want to see inside it, I'll link to a video in the video description, but all you're going to see is an LCD panel with some wires going down to a circuit board at the back. Exactly what you'd expect, nothing of any note. Now if you opened up a proper physical pinball table, that'd be interesting, that'd be something to talk about, but a screen attached to a computer, I think we've all seen that before. Moving on to the controls, on either side you've got these red flipper buttons that feel exactly how flipper buttons should do, and then the white buttons next to these are for nudging the table to either side. There's also another nudge forward button on the front of the unit. However, the table does have accelerometers in it, so you can activate the same nudge features by physically interacting with the table. The other controls on the front, well, on the left you've got the back or rewind button, and then you've got play, home, and the red button on the right, well, that's for the plunger. You use these controls in combination with the D-pad that's on the top of the unit to select the games and navigate the numerous menus and features. But it's this D-pad that really lets the side down. It is awful. I don't know how they managed to find one that was this poor. You wouldn't have thought there'd be a company around still in business that could make something this bad. But they found that company and they bought a load of D-pads from them and they stuck them in these pinball tables. I mean, even if you'd have got some kind of clone Nintendo console in the 1990s off a market stall, the little hollow, lightweight controllers on that would have had better, more precise and accurate D-pads than this one. If you're trying to navigate through the screens here to pick anything out, you'll often end up in the wrong thing. You're trying to go through your matrix of tables, multiple pages, and you'll find yourself, rather than going horizontal, you'll drop down a couple of lines every time. And good luck trying to navigate the on-screen keyboard with this. It's about as much fun as trying to play Twister with a broken pelvis. However, you can kind of mitigate your use of the D-pad. You don't have to use it all the time. Sometimes the buttons will double for the functions, and you can put your tables into favourites, so then you've got less to navigate through to pick your favourite thing. But yeah, that's just awful. But talking of download codes, here's another area where I feel there's room for improvement. There are various game packs available for tables. Now you can buy these on the Atgames website through a browser on your phone, tablet or computer. You get a download code that you then have to enter into the pinball table. Of course, to download any new tables, it's got to be connected up to the internet via either Wi-Fi or Ethernet. Once that code has been entered though into the on-screen keyboard, good luck with that, then you go into the catalogue of packs that's shown on the table and click on the one that you bought, which then lets you download it into either an external USB drive that you've formatted in the table and plugged in the back, or you can just put it into the built-in 16 gigabytes of storage. Now that whole process seems a little bit convoluted. There's room for streamlining. However, the main issue I've got with it is the confusing catalogue. There's arcade games mixed in with pinball tables, and not all games work on all Atgames devices. For example, I bought a set of Gottlieb tables only to find out that these don't currently work with the Micro. The catalogue available on the table itself shows that there is a set of Gottlieb tables specifically for the Micro, but then these can't be purchased via the online store. It all really just needs a bit of a rethink and a tidy up. But again, got to point out, by no means a deal breaker. It's something that they can sort out in time, and I have successfully navigated the current system to buy myself a set of Dr. Zeus tables and a Zachariah collection that are working just fine.
But our fish said, no, make that cat go away. Double jackpot. Triple jackpot.
Now, I should mention that up to a couple of weeks ago, I had almost no knowledge about this whole virtual pinball scene as it is nowadays. Of course, over the years, I've played some emulated pinball games or collections of games on consoles and PCs. I knew that Stern were making new proper physical tables, and there was various other companies out there making virtual tables. But I always assumed that the games being played on there were existing pinball tables that people had recreated in the virtual space. I had no idea that there were these companies out there and individuals just creating virtual pinball tables that don't actually exist physically, just for this virtual pinball space. You might have noticed from the included games list that many of the Zachariah tables are listed in multiple versions. Now, there's no need to feel shortchanged by this, as it's not like an old games console from the 1970s where you've got 10 versions of Pong that are virtually indistinguishable from each other. The tables in here, they are all distinct. There's one that's based around a real table, and then the others are imagining what that table would have been like if it had existed in a different era. And they all play very differently from one another. So when you see 50 tables listed, you really are getting 50 different gameplay experiences. Now, you might have noticed some of the backglass images are a little bit stretched out, and that's because the original artwork designs on the proper physical pinball tables are at a different aspect ratio to the screen. Now, you can adjust the way you want these displayed in the preferences, but the newly made tables, those have back glass graphics with dimensions that are suited to the horizontal layout. There's plenty more here that I haven't properly explored yet. For example, there's global high score tables, and those aren't something I'll be troubling, as well as local. There seems to be online multiplayer, and I haven't looked into playing vertical arcade games on that screen yet. I just wanted to play pinball in my home on something that feels right.
Students, pay attention. Once more.
Now, whilst the built-in tables should keep most people happy for hours, of course the list that's in here leaves out some of the major pinball manufacturers. And even if you were to be able to download the Gottlieb packs, I'm sure most people would have perhaps a pinball table that they remember playing years ago that isn't available in the store for this system. And of course that's where the connectivity with a PC comes in. So once you connect your PC up, put it into the HDMI input on the back, you can run an emulator on the PC or a virtual pinball game, put the output through here, use the controls on here, and with the optional VIBS board, you can also access the back panel and send the second display up to there as well. And all this will even work with a Steam Deck. Something to think about for another day, but I've got to say, with all the games in here, it's going to keep me busy for quite some time.
Please just get out of the snow.
I think the last time I played a virtual pinball table was perhaps 10 years ago. And back then, I think it might have been the particular table I played, or maybe the tech wasn't ready, but I just wasn't sold on it at all. It didn't seem a patch on the real thing to me. It was a low frame rate on the table I was playing, and the dodgy graphics, perhaps the washed out display. Nothing about it really appealed, and it put me off the whole idea. I'm glad I went back and had another look, because things have either moved on immensely, or I was just using the wrong table back then, because now it's a completely different experience. And I can completely see the benefit of having a virtual pinball table, the appeal of one. Of course, I'm not saying it's like a physical table versus virtual, like which one's the best. In fact, if I had the room in the house for whatever I needed, I'd have a real table, a classic, one that I always wanted, and next to that, I'd definitely have a virtual pinball table for all the other games that I could play, because being able to play so many different games on one of these is a massive appeal, rather than having a full room with 30 pinball tables in it, just having them all in one. Of course, it's not quite the same experience, but it's very close. Now, if I only had the room for one pinball table, it'd have to be a virtual one. I think I'd have to get a top-end one with all the bells and whistles and the haptics and the flashing lights and the big back glass and the matrix and all that. But I think if it was just one, that's the table that I'd have in the house. But I don't have the luxury of being able to do either of those two things due to the space. So this is as close as I'm going to get. I'm really quite happy with it, though. Now, I've got to mention a few YouTube channels that I've been using to get some more information about this, because I mentioned I'm very green about this whole subject. It's completely passed me by. Probably in the last 10 years, if you added it all up, I bet I've played 5 minutes of pinball. So I'm no expert in this by any means. 5 minutes before the last couple of weeks, and then you can add on a few more hours. But I want to talk about some YouTube channels that I've been looking at that have been giving some useful information to me about the world of virtual pinball. So let's have a look at those. The first one I'd like to mention is Digital Victory. This is a channel that seems to specialise in virtual pinball tables, and I suggest you take a look at his list of the top 10 virtual pinball releases of 2022 video to get an idea of the new tables that are being created. Second, there's Wagner's Tech Talk, who's already got hold of a VIBS board for a Pinball Micro, and his videos show you how to install this amongst many other things. And finally, from my list, there's Michael B, the Game Genie, who has plenty of videos and reviews about home arcade machines, including the Atgames range. And I'll put links to these in the video description. Oh, and one thing I should say is don't do what I did and import one of these. I wouldn't recommend it. There's two main reasons. The first one is that it will no doubt cost less when this thing comes out here officially in the UK. And given that the larger one of these tables is already out here, I think it's only a matter of time before the smaller one arrives and is sold officially as well. But the second reason is that by importing one of these myself from the US, it doesn't have any warranty on it. It's a product that's only supposed to be sold in the US. So if I'd have opened up the box and this thing hadn't worked at all, or had been all smashed up inside or whatever, not an awful lot I could have done about that. I would have lost all my money. That said, I'm glad it's working. I'm glad I got it. I'm enjoying it. It's the best thing I've got this year. And now it's making me look around thinking, I wonder if I could fit a larger one of these somewhere in the house. But yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I did have an idea though. Given that you can now do these virtual tables on screens and they really look quite effective, a lot of the virtual pinball tables that are out there are trying to look like real tables with big chunky bases on them. But if you look inside, it's just a big hollow thing with a little computer board in there. So what if somebody made like a fold-out one? Imagine you had like a flat screen TV, but it was actually facing the wall. The screen was facing the wall. It was backed with perhaps a nice 3/4 length mirror. So during the daytime, it looks like a mirror, perhaps a slightly chunky one, but you know, otherwise normal. But you could fold it down, legs pop out, some buttons on the side, small computer board inside it somewhere. You can have maybe a 50-inch screen fold-down pinball table that just folds away most of the time. That'd be ideal. So yeah, if you're a virtual pinball table manufacturer, rather than just trying to make them all look like a real pinball table, think about the people that can't fit a real pinball table in their house but would like a bigger one, and see what you can do with that idea. I mean, this positive thinking worked with getting the sound burger back, didn't it? So fingers crossed, eh? But anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.